Welcome to Agree to Disagree, the podcast where two sisters show how you can disagree about everything but still keep that family bond and friendship.
That's right. We're Sharon and Karen, and we don't just see the world differently, we live it differently. Grab a coffee, settle in, and enjoy the conversation. Who knows? You might even find yourself changing sides.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and start
I don't have to
recording.
see myself. Okay.
Hi, Sharon.
Hi, Karen.
Are you feeling better?
You?
I'm good.
I'm feeling better.
Yeah, sure. You're much better.
I don't know how to mute to cough. I don't know how. Okay, I hope so, because sometimes it gets pretty rough.
If you start hacking away.
So I'm going to put a cough drop in.
Okay, because you're going to be talking a lot.
I know, and then I start coughing a lot.
Yeah.
That
All
does
right.
happen. What are we talking about today?
We're going to talk about the Ukrainian-Russian war.
And whether
So
the
much
U.S. should
fun.
be involved.
And whether the U.S. should be involved. Did you do some research on this?
I did.
Oh, good, because I didn't do a whole lot. I mean, I did some. I actually have a whole page of notes. Look, a whole page of notes. So I did do some research.
You did way more than I did.
Yeah.
I was standing in the airport security line and was reading just on my phone while I was in security. That's about all I did.
Well, I have to take notes because inevitably, with my memory, I can research something even 10 minutes before I talk about it. But if I don't write it down, I'm going to forget. So I took a lot of notes, but this is why I could never be a lawyer, actually. I always wanted to be a lawyer when I was little.
Oh, you would be such a good attorney.
No, I wouldn't, because I don't like to do research. And I am reminded of that every week when I have to start doing research for this stuff. I'm not good at research and I don't like to do research.
Yeah, but as an attorney, you have paralegals that do the research for you. You have research teams.
Not in law school.
Well, not in law school. No.
Yeah.
Well, you gotta do the work.
No, that's it. I would not have made it through law school.
Gosh.
I would not have made it through law school. I don't like doing research.
You would have. You just wouldn't have liked it.
Oh, I wouldn't have
got
made it.
out, and then
and I fall
started
asleep.
without the research.
I fall asleep whenever I'm reading boring things, so I wouldn't have been able to even stay awake to read all the material. I knew that a long time ago.
And law books, that's pretty boring stuff.
Do you know what really kept me out of law school? Did I ever tell you that I got an LSAT practice book? Bought an LSAT practice book and decades ago.
Yeah.
And I'm
We're pretty old.
And yeah, I know. Thanks for that reminder.
We don't look at it.
Well, our listeners, the two listeners we have, wouldn't know how old we look because we don't do video yet.
That's right.
Yet.
That's right. Well, we have to get a lot more listeners before I'm going to go on camera. That's all I got to say.
Well, I
bought an LSAT.
I bought an LSAT book because, I think I'm much smarter than I am. And
Don't we all?
Said to myself, well, I'll go through this because that's how I passed the GMAT getting into the master's program. I just took a sample GMAT and passed. And I'm like, okay, well, I don't have to actually study for it. So I started the LSAT book and I was getting every question wrong. And I didn't even understand the answers when I would read the answers. I didn't agree with the answers. And I'm like, I don't think that law school is for me.
So, when I finished my master's in social work and I went to start studying for my license, because after you get your master's, then you have to get licensed. But I just wanted my LMSW. And when I was studying for it and I took the practice test, there were 5 sections and I aced all the sections except for one. And the section that I didn't ace was the counseling session, family and individual counseling kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then I went back and I looked at the answers and I'm like, oh, well, I disagree.
Yeah.
No, I would not do that.
Exactly. Then you're like, yeah, that's not the field I should be in.
I'm like, no, disagree with that. No. Well, I was a big believer in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is short-term therapy.
Yeah. I've been through a lot of that.
Yeah, I'm not into the, years and years with the same counselor and
psychoanalysis.
Psychoanalysis, the years and years of psychoanalysis. I'm like, if I can't help you in 6 months and give you the tools you need to go on your way and be happy, then you need to find another counselor because this is not working. But the other thing that you reminded me of when I was halfway through my master's program and I told my husband, and I don't know if you remember, but when I was getting my master's, I was driving 4 hours one way to the school, to the university, one way. Started with a 1-year-old and a 4-year-old, right? Halfway through, I told my husband, I think I want to go to law school after I finished my master's. And he just kind of went white and didn't say anything. And then about a week later, he came to me. He said, okay, I think we could probably finish your degree. I think we can defer your student loan and then take out another loan for your law degree, because at least then you'll be making a lot of money and we can pay off all this debt. And I said, well, wait, when we talked last week, didn't I tell you I wanted to be a civil liberties attorney?
Oh my gosh.
And he's like, nope, never mind. No law school. You'll never be able to pay off the debt.
Exactly.
So I did not go to law school either.
Just think how much better off the country would be right now if you and I were lawyers.
Oh, gosh. I think our 2 listeners would probably disagree with that.
Yeah, probably. Thank God we never went to law school.
I know. Thank God they never went to law school. Woo. Yeah. So Russia and Ukraine, they've been in discourse for 1,000 years, one way or the other. The last 30 years, that's when Ukraine broke away and became a sovereign state, is what I saw was 30 years ago.
Yeah, because they used to be part of Russia.
Right.
Yeah.
So 30 years. So now things have really gotten...
There have been issues, but again, we're talking about the U.S. We're not talking about the history of the Ukraine Russia issue, but should the U.S. be involved? I think that we should start around the time frame of Putin puts his tanks invading, even before the invasion. I was teaching at the time, and every time anything comes up with the U.S., all my students ask me questions about how I feel about what's going on.
Yeah.
So Russia had put tanks and troops along the border, and he had not yet invaded. And I remember telling my students, because I'm so smart, and I was like, oh, he's never going to invade. The Western world is never going to let this happen. Don't worry. They're not going to let this happen. And I remember...
Really? You didn't think it'd invade?
I didn't think that the Western world would allow it to happen. In my opinion, they could have prevented it, and they didn't. And this is where it goes to, should the U.S. be involved? I remember seeing on television around that time, Zelensky came on, and this was before Putin invaded, and he was talking so confidently. I turned to my husband and I said, that does not make any sense. I said, someone is supporting him. Someone is telling him to stand up to this, because there's no way Ukraine on its own would stand up and challenge Putin and say, no, we are not going anywhere. And so at that time, I think that they were in talks. I think that the Western world told Zelensky, we got your back, and don't worry about anything that Putin does, because we're going to be here to support you. And I think that's why he was so confident in the early days before Putin invaded. And that's why he's so angry now, is because, in my opinion, again, I don't have any facts to back this up. Heaven forbid I get facts to back up what I'm saying.
That'd be the end of the world.
Exactly. But I feel like that's why he's so angry now, is because the Western world kind of let him down, made him promises that they didn't keep by saying, we're going to support you through this. What I found,
we've already given $43 billion. How is that not supporting?
Supporting to a certain extent, but not supporting in the way that I think Zelensky thought. I think Zelensky thought that it was going to be planes overhead, troops on the ground. We're going to support you. We're going to be there to protect you. Because I think he would have negotiated with Putin in the beginning to prevent that invasion.
Really?
Yeah, I do. I do. If the Western world had not said, we're going to support you in this, we've got your back.
Yeah, I don't know how we would ever even be able to research and find out if that happened behind closed doors, though. Do you know what I'm saying? If those conversations happened.
I did find something that said that there were some meetings that were going on, but I think it was after the invasion started.
It was after the
because
invasion.
You know what
That's
this
the
is,
only thing I found.
You know, because I had seen a professor saying, Putin warned about this. He warned the Western world that this was what was going to happen if NATO kept expanding. And this is NATO continuing to expand, threatening Putin's borders. And I'm not pro-Putin at all. Let me preface this by saying I am not pro-Putin. And it's so funny because when I was on ChatGDP doing my give me some talking points for my podcast, because I use ChatGDP for everything.
I don't use it ever.
Because it was giving me only pro-Western side. And I wanted just facts. And so ChatGPT even was biased in the information that it was giving me. And I said, give this to me from the perspective of Putin. What would a pro-Russia stance be on this? And it gave me a caveat at the top, a warning saying, we just want you to know that we do not support Russia in this. And I'm like, what the hell is this?
Wait, what?
ChatGPT gave me a warning.
Is that an American company or is that a China company?
This is
because
American.
China is completely supportive of
This is American.
Putin. But so ChatGPT is an American company because most AI comes out of China. I mean, that's where it started.
I don't know about that.
So even ChatGPT,
even AI was telling me, because you have to understand, remember where it's getting its information. It's getting its information from the internet. It's not being programmed. It's just drawing information from everything that exists out there. So all the information that's pulling is pro-Western slant.
Well, that's because China doesn't allow, access to their stuff. Because if it did, then they'd pull that stuff too, and that stuff would be all pro-Putin.
I don't know if it would be pro-Putin.
Oh, no, they want Putin to win.
This is a conversation about, should the U.S. be involved in this? Do you think, we didn't even start with where we stand, do you think the U.S. should be involved in this?
So my gut, and what I've been saying this for years, probably for about 20 some odd years, I think the U.S. should stay out of all foreign affairs and conflicts like this because it's none of our business. Let them fight it out. Why do we have to police the world? Who made us the policemen of the world? That's always been my stance for the last 20, 25 years. However, there are financial reasons that the U.S. gets involved in these things. Because you and I we agree money is at the root of most stuff, right?
Yeah.
And money is at the root of this. World economic trade is at the root of this.
It's not even just world economic trade. It's world economic dominance. It's world dominance.
And you and I kind of disagreed about this. I think also as Americans, we feel the need not only to police the world, but also to step in when we think human rights are being.
Well, yeah, but if you think that we shouldn't, then you disagree with us even stepping in World War I or World War II.
I know. I said just the last 20 or 25 years, I've decided this, that I thought this.
Well, that's convenient. There's been no World War.
Yes. Although, one of the headlines that I read about this is Putin said the U.S. has stopped a World War III with this action that we've taken recently.
Yeah. Again, I feel like this is well, I'll believe Putin when I want to, just like I'll believe Trump when I want to.
No, I think Putin's completely off the mark on that. I don't think this was going to be a World War III. I do not believe him at all. There are human rights issues going on, but again, should we always get involved in human rights issues? And there are financial reasons because of world economic trade.
Yeah, but when is it?
And the world domination. There's a third one, world domination, right? Is Putin becoming another Hitler,
Wow, I don't think so. I think Putin just is Putin. Putin wants his territory back, and he considers Ukraine as part of that territory. There's a Russian part of Ukraine that is more pro-Russia.
So I read an article, and I told you I only read articles from AP when I'm researching stuff for our conversations, but I read an article saying that he has stolen children from Ukraine and are putting them in, training them to fight and all this kind of stuff. And
not training them to fight. What I know of that story is that they were taking children and basically giving them to Russian parents to raise.
Yeah.
Because to raise them as Russian.
Raise them as Russian.
Yeah.
And I don't know, that sounds a little Hitlerish to me. When you steal children from their parents, that sounds very...
Okay. Steal children from their parents. The Americans did it at the border. Some of those children were never returned from their parents.
We'll have to have a conversation.
So it's okay if it's an illegal alien coming in, but it's not okay if it's in a war?
No, we're going to have to talk about that at another time.
I'm just saying, apples to apples. Stealing children is stealing children.
We didn't steal children.
taking children away from their parents and then those parents never seeing those children again. That's
just stories you've heard. That's stories you've heard.
Oh, you don't believe it ever happened?
Another time. We'll talk about it another time. I think there's certain things that on the border that, remember, I had a son stationed at the border. So.
Just because he never saw it happen didn't mean it didn't happen. It's documented. It's documented. Okay. There are hundreds of cases.
We'll talk about it later. We'll talk about it another time. That's not what we're talking about right now.
Okay.
So let me ask you. So what do you think? Do you think the U.S. should be involved in the Ukraine-Russia war?
I think that the U.S. by itself, no. I think that, again, I told you at the beginning what I think. I think that the U.S. and the EU went to Ukraine and said, we're going to have your back, and they ended up not having their back. I still don't.
I think only the U.S. has had his back. The EU hasn't.
Yes, they have. They've been given weapons and money as well.
I think Zelensky's even complained about that.
Zelensky's complained about everyone that hasn't stepped up. Again, because I think that he was promised things in the beginning that he didn't receive.
So let me ask you this. Do you think, so our involvement right now to date has been just money. Do you think we should send troops over there and physically get involved in this war?
No, I don't think that we should be involved at all, actually. Okay. I think that the U.S. shouldn't be involved. And again, it makes me angry because it should have never happened. All Putin wanted was a guarantee that Ukraine was not going to enter NATO, not going to become part of NATO. And he wanted secure borders. He wanted them to back off and stop encroaching NATO upon their borders. And the EU and the US should have abided by that, in my opinion. They should have said, yeah, you're right. Because remember Cuba, Russia was going to put nukes on Cuba and the US went ballistic. If Russia were to get this close, say put a base in Mexico with weapons, do you think the U.S. would stand for that?
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. So I think it's hypocritical to say, well, Putin should just sit back and let NATO expand when NATO's only function is to keep Russia at bay.
Why do you say that's their only function?
NATO?
Is that their mission statement? Let's keep Russia at bay?
Well, that's why they were formed.
That's not the only reason they were formed.
It was a primary reason to keep.
Think that was the only reason NATO was formed.
Am I confusing NATO with something else?
We might need to look that up right now. We need to look that up.
NATO.
I've never
committed to protecting each other from any threat, which the threat was.
Okay, it's not just Russia. Okay,
but it was formed primarily to protect each other from Russia. And this is what Putin said, I don't want Ukraine to join NATO. And so back in 1994, there was the Budapest Memorandum. Ukraine used to have nuclear weapons. So when the Soviet Union dissolved, Ukraine had a lot of the nuclear weapons, the world's third largest at the time.
Yeah, in their capital city or close to it or something.
The Budapest Memorandum in 1994, Ukraine agreed to give up all of its nukes. And in return, Russia, the UK, and the US pledged to respect Ukraine's sovereignty and borders. And Putin wanted guarantees of no more NATO expansion. He didn't get it in writing at the time, but he said he got verbal agreement from the US and the UK that there would be no more NATO expansion. That was in 1994.
Yeah, but did he invade because Ukraine was trying to increase their border size?
No, he invaded because Ukraine was trying to become part of NATO. Ukraine.
But it's okay if they're a part of NATO.
But in 1994, Putin had blatantly said, I do not want NATO expansion. And what did NATO do? They tried to expand, knowing it would piss off Putin.
Well, hang on. No. Okay, first of all, they didn't do it to piss off Putin. Second of all, why wouldn't Ukraine be allowed into NATO if they are a sovereign country?
I'm saying this was the agreement.
You can't expand NATO.
I'm saying this was the agreement. But to keep Russia from invading any further, they had this agreement. Now, to me, if you have an agreement, stick to an agreement. So from the Russian perspective, another podcast. We don't stick to any agreements anymore.
No, nobody does.
So there was a Bucharest summit in 2008.
Oh my gosh, you're reading your notes now.
NATO declared that Ukraine and Georgia would eventually become members. And Putin publicly opposed it and said it was a direct threat to Russian security. So that was in 2008.
And there hasn't been any threat to his security.
There has been. In 2014,
in 20 years.
There was a pro-Russian president in Ukraine, and there was an overthrow of that government, and Putin saw it as a Western-backed coup to overthrow the pro-Russian president in Ukraine. So
but
the next
said there
month,
was a pro-Russian
in Ukraine, and a month later, there was a pro-Russian leader in Ukraine in 2014 in February that was overthrown, and Putin believes it was because the Western world backed a coup.
Okay, I see what you're saying now.
Yeah, a month later, Russia annexed Crimea.
But maybe we had nothing to do with that, and it was just
because the U.S. is never involved in any coups,
I'm just saying. What? To what end? So, to what end would we have gotten involved then? Just because
you don't want the Western world does not want a pro-Russian leader in any country. Period.
China has a pro-Russian leader. China's all about Russia.
China is not all about Russia. China is about China. China cares about China. China cares about China. China cares about China. China doesn't care about anyone but China.
Talk?
No, because you're not listening to me. China cares about China.
How can I not listen when you repeat the same thing 600 times? I can listen 600 times. But China does.
See, you're not listening to me.
No, you're not listening to me. China does want Russia to win because it shows them there can be world dominance. We can take over. We can.
China doesn't care. China doesn't care. China cares about the U.S. losing its hegemony in the world. That is true. But they don't care if that's done through Russia winning or not. China cares about China. China is looking 100 years down the road. That is Chinese culture. They are not banking on what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years. They're banking on what's going to happen in the next 50 to 100 years. And that is how China has always operated.
I don't know about that. I disagree. We ought to have a podcast on that one. Because I disagree with you on that one. I think China is very interested in what is going to happen with this and with whether Russia wins or not. Now, I want to go back to something you said, though. You said you don't think they should get involved.
Who?
But then
the U.S.?
The U.S. You don't think the U.S. should get involved. But then I'm going to pose the question to you that you posed to me. So if human atrocities are happening, we shouldn't get involved?
What human atrocities?
We shouldn't have gotten involved in World War II?
What human atrocities
I'm posing the same question to you that you posed to me.
I don't have a problem with World War II, but should we get involved in every conflict? No.
Okay, you just had a better answer than I did, but mine was funnier.
I don't know what to say.
My answer was funnier.
You're much funnier than I am.
I don't know about that, but I just don't do as much research as you do. So I'm not prepared for these conversations. So I do.
And I've got my notes.
I know. I've seen you. Like, you start going on a rant and you look down at your notes. I'm like, oh, she's got her notes.
Uh-oh. She's got her notes. Again, because I will forget everything. My husband can rattle all this off on his top of his head. He still remembers dates and figures and things like that. And I'm like, I can't remember what I had for breakfast.
I have it all on my phone, but because I couldn't get my iPad to work today, I am on my phone, and now I can't go to all my saved stuff on my phone that I usually refer to when we're talking. I'm like, dang it.
That wraps up part 1 of our deep dive into the Ukraine-Russia war. We've covered a lot already, but trust us, we're just getting started. In part 2, we'll finish our discussion of whether we think the U.S. should be involved in this or any other conflicts around the world. Make sure to hit follow or subscribe so you don't miss it. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll catch you in part 2.
That wraps up today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a rating and review. It helps us improve and get the word out.
Reach out to us on Facebook and Instagram, or shoot us an email at agreedtodisagree@gmail.com.
Let us know what you think, what topics you'd like us to cover, or any questions you might have. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode.